All right. Oh, it's gonna let somebody in the waiting room. All right, welcome everyone. Thank you for coming out on this afternoon. We appreciate it. We have Julie Milewski joining us again. She is the Associate Director over at Student Success and Transition at Binghamton University. And she's going to be preparing all of you to get the year started off right, get you motivated. We're very excited to have Julia with us. So I'm just going to kick it off to her.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Sophia. So hi, everybody. I hope you're having a good day so far and a good week. I know we've made it halfway through. So I am Julia Milewski. I am the Associate Director of Student Transition and Success, as Sophia mentioned. And so we're going to talk today about setting goals and staying motivated. And a little play on the phrase new year, new me that we all hear in like December and January around New Year's. But thinking about this as new school year, new me. So how can we kind of update and shift and elevate some of the practices that you might already have going for you, just to help you reach your goals a little bit easier, or to help you reach new goals as well. So we're gonna go ahead and dive in to some of the content here. So what I typically like to do though is just to get to know kind of who is in the crowd and who's with us today. And I like to do that by talking about food. Food is one of my favorite things to talk about. So in the chat box, if you have a moment, please put in your name and your favorite pizza topping. So the reason I do this is, I mean, I don't know who doesn't love a good pizza topping. It's also a pretty controversial topic, right? So I know we have some people who love pineapple on pizza. We have people who definitely do not think pineapple belongs on pizza. Hi, Danny, thank you. So just cheese, awesome. I know my personal favorite, I'm like a margarita gal. So just having like fresh basil and cheese and like roasted tomatoes is my jam. Sophia, cheese, awesome. Welcome, welcome. If I am feeling a little crazy, sometimes I will have like there's this pizza that I've had in the past that has like really hot spicy pepperoni and jalapenos, and then you drizzle honey over it, and like that is really life-changing. So I always like to kind of see where other people are at. All right. So if you are still working on typing, no worries at all. You can go ahead and pop your name and your favorite pizza topping in the chat box whenever you have a moment. And then, oh, thank you, Cherish. Oh, bacon. Okay. Bacon on pizza. Yes. Like a good breakfast pizza too. I'm from Endicott originally, so I'm always a big fan of Roma's Pizza in Endicott, and they have a really good breakfast pizza at Roma's with lots of bacon on it. So that's for sure a good one too. All right, so we're gonna move on from pizza, because though we could probably talk about it the whole time, we do have some other things to chat about. So I appreciate those of you who had shared your name and your favorite topping. So we are going to move on. So first thing that we'll cover is how to identify goals and thinking about goal setting and how we can do that effectively. So I like to really identify them as thinking about your goals in a holistic way. So your holistic wellness. So that doesn't just mean your academic goals, but they could be your personal goals, professional goals, even social goals that you might have. Athletic goals too. Are goals associated with your hobbies. So thinking about how many different areas you could be setting effective goals for in your life, and how to use that strategically to help you reach new levels of success. So with this, we'll want to understand motivation and values, which we'll do a couple exercises today together to allow you to really think about your motivation and to think about your value systems. Another important part of talking about goals is identifying that they can be short-term or long-term. So a short-term goal could be something like making a to-do list for your day, right? Like a to-do list is essentially just a list of short-term goals that you'd like to accomplish. So it could be something that happens in a day. It could be a short-term goal that maybe your time frame is a week, maybe a couple months. Maybe a short-term goal is the next 1 to 3 years, and then your long-term goal is 5+ or 10+ years later. So it's really up to you when you're setting this time frame for your goals. Whether you feel like having more immediate action being taken that might be falling within a short-term goal, or thinking about some of those more multi-step goals. So if your goal is to, let's say, find the cure for cancer, fantastic goal, right? It's going to take a lot of steps before you're able to see that goal and come to fruition. So that long-term process, that's going to be a multi-step type goal. That would be something that would fall into the long-term category. So when you're starting to think about where do my goals, what type of goals do I want to set? My academic, personal, professional, or, what is the time frame for that too? The last thing before we move on from this slide is going to be thinking about how if we set a goal, that's the great first step, but it really requires buy-in, effort, and commitment. So you have to believe in the goal that you're setting, right? So if you are setting the goal of, I want to, let's say you're setting a goal of like, I want to make the soccer team, or I want to, you have like an athletic goal or an academic goal, or you want to become the president of your class, right? So really setting a goal that you are going to be passionate about and feel inspired by is going to allow you to hone more of that motivation. And also it becomes easier to put in that effort if it's something that you have really committed to, okay? Especially when we talk about long-term goals though, that commitment piece is going to be important because you will undoubtedly have moments where you are starting to rethink your goals, or maybe you have to pivot and refocus your goals a little bit. And that commitment is what's going to get you to continue, persist, and see that goal to the end success, right? So this is just a very base overview of how to identify your goals and what goes into the goal setting process. So part of that I had mentioned is identifying your values and your motivation. So one thing that I invite you all to do is to take a moment and to think about, why do you think your values are important in goal setting? You don't have to respond. Just take a moment to, reflect on this independently. Why do you think your values are important in goal setting? And this is a question that I'm going to invite you to come back to, not only today, but also as you're moving through your studies and, going beyond school. How do your personal values impact your motivation? How do they impact the success levels that you're hoping to reach? All right. So what we're going to do is we're going to do a little values assessment. Okay, so you will, there's on the next slide, there is a big list of words that are all values. Okay, so things that we find to be important in our life. And you'll read through the list. It's a little bit long, so I'll give a little bit of extra time there. But read through the list of values and identify, and then write down the top 5 values that you feel impact your life and influence your behaviors. Okay, so an example of this might be, I know one of my personal values is family. So I value family. And so for me, family really impacts, and this value of it really impacts my choices in my everyday life. So I might make different choices because I put and I prioritize my family first. So I might make different choices or have different behaviors than somebody who has a different core value. So I'm going to go on to the next slide. And when I do that, I'm actually going to pop off video and I'm going to set a timer for 4 minutes. And I'm going to invite all of you to read through the list and you'll understand why 4 minutes. That might seem like a little bit long, but it's a long list. So read through the list and identify 5 values that you find to be impactful and influence your life. Okay. Now with this, when I go to the next slide, I'll just do it right now. Okay, so wow, there's a lot of words here, right? So if you find that you have more than 5, I encourage you to then focus on identifying 10. And then from the 10, narrow it down to your top 5. Okay, so for the next 4 minutes, I'm going to set a timer. I'm going to turn off my video and mute myself so we can all have some quiet work time, really reflect, read through this list, and identify your top 5 values. Okay, I'll see you in just a few seconds here. All right, it's me again. You have 2 more minutes. We're about at our halfway point. So if you are identifying your 5 top values, you have 2 more minutes or a little bit less than that to identify those. All right, so we're going to be giving it about 10 more seconds, and then we will dive back in. Okay. All right, so hopefully you were able to take some time to read through this ginormous list of values and identify maybe first your top 10 values that really impact your behaviors and where you find to be the most important pieces of your life or your personality or just your being in general. And then narrowing those top 10 down to that top 5. Okay, so what we're going to do from here is, first of all, I'm going to encourage you to really think about how your values might impact your goal setting and how that might impact your motivation too. So as we move through the presentation here, I just encourage you to think about those different components that you have identified or written down and, you know, how that might play into the type of goals that you set, who you set goals for, and then how you become most motivated. So how to set goals effectively. So we get into a little bit more of the practical piece here. So a lot of times we talk about SMART goals, and SMART is an acronym that stands for specific, measurable, achievable or actionable, relevant, and time-based. So an example of a SMART goal would be, let's see, I want to learn how to bake macaron cookies in the next month, but more specifically, the famous French macaron cookies, and learn how to make the really specific technique. It's called a foot, when there's like those beautiful little bubbles around the edges. So really perfect that, right? So it's specific, it's measurable because I'll know if I perfected it or not. It's actionable because it's something that I can realistically do. It's relevant to my hobby because I like baking as my hobby. And it's time-based, meaning I gave myself a time frame. Within the next month, I want to be able to really master and learn how to make a French macaron with that beautiful, foot technique is what it's called. So starting to think about how can I make my goals SMART? All right. One example of this that I do sometimes give too when I'm working with students is like the example that I shared earlier of, if you have the goal of curing cancer, that is a beautiful goal. However, it doesn't follow the SMART framework. It's not as specific, it's not as measurable, it's not as actionable in this current moment. It might be relevant to you. And there's no time base, right? There's no time frame that you're setting. So if your goal was to find the cure for cancer, SMART goals associated with that larger goal might be begin studying science. With that, join the chemistry club on campus or join the biology club at school, right? And then maybe the next step would be learn what I have to do to become a researcher or to pursue higher education in the fields necessary to research cancer and the support for cancer patients, right? So this is something that is a fantastic goal, but it's really going to be a matter of honing in and becoming specific, having measurable, actionable items that are relevant and have that time frame, okay? The other piece of goal setting is thinking about that motivation. I had mentioned the buy-in and the commitment that's required. So a lot of times I work with students who say, but what if the goal isn't my own, right? So what if you are getting pressure from a family member or getting pressure from a teacher or an advisor or a friend to pursue a specific goal? Now, I typically work with college students. So the example that comes to mind is we sometimes have students who they want to study a specific topic. So maybe they really love history, and like history is their thing, but their parents are pressuring them to study accounting because in their parents' mind, accounting is going to have clearer career path than history. And so in that situation, students don't always have the ability to say, no, I don't want that goal. I'm not going to do it. Right. So in the event that you have to pursue a goal that maybe isn't your own, and it's really hard to find that buy-in and that motivation, starting to reframe and think about how could this goal, so the example of, accounting, how can this goal of my parents wanting me to become an accountant, and I have no interest in that, how could I reframe it and make it more interesting to myself? So usually what we'll start to talk about is, okay, so this goal that you're working with is to become an accountant. You're not super excited about this, but you're really excited about history, but more so you're excited about sports history, right? And so with this, have you ever thought about, pursuing a career with Sports Illustrated? They have accountants, right? So that's a business. Every business needs an accountant, or maybe a sports organization, maybe Fenway Park. If you, even if you're a Yankees fan, I think a lot of times we can appreciate the history that's behind Fenway Park in Boston for the Boston Red Sox. And so, thinking about, okay, so they probably have some type of accounting department. How can I marry my two interests to then allow me to get excited about this goal, right? So you start to refocus it and think, okay, even though I'm starting out and I'm having a hard time finding motivation, how can I reframe the task at hand? So in this case, how can I reframe the goal that I don't really identify with into a way that gets me excited and willing to work towards it? Okay. The next part of effective goal setting is to keep your goal priorities organized. So what I mean by this is a lot of times, like we talked about, those SMART goals are going to have several steps to them because they're going to be specific and measurable, and really allowing yourself some type of structure to say, okay, so this is the first part of the goal that I want to pursue. This is the second part, third part, fourth part, and breaking it down into small actionable steps and keeping those prioritized. Checking in with progress. So a lot of times we tend to set goals when we're feeling motivated. And then we set them and we don't think about them again until either somebody asks or for whatever reason we're reminded of them. You can think about the example of how people set resolutions at the beginning of the new year, right? And a lot of times we set the resolution, the new year starts, we get distracted, we forget what that was, and then, I'm not even checking with progress because I'm not making progress. Right? So if you set a goal that you are really committed to achieving, having check-in points and having progress points where you can say, okay, every first of the month, I'm going to sit down and check in with this list of 4 goals that I have for myself. And then allowing yourself that time to reflect and to pivot when needed. So maybe you set a goal and it's no longer relevant because circumstances have changed. Or maybe you have, extenuating circumstances that have impacted your ability to achieve the goal in the time frame that you've set. We worked with a lot of students during COVID who were experiencing this exact situation. They had goals in mind that they were working towards, but the extenuating circumstances, changes in environment, changes of stress levels, needing to refocus, right, and more prioritize things on more important areas like taking care of family or, just kind of getting through, really allowing yourself to have that time to check in, reflect, and then pivot or redefine when the goals that you had initially set are either no longer relevant or no longer achievable in the current moment. Okay, so it's not so much about being like, I can't do that anymore, I'm just not going to work towards it. Because that's what I think our tendency is to do. We have these things that impact our ability to achieve the goal. So our first reaction is, I'm just going to throw it out. I'm just going to stop working towards it. It can't happen right now. But instead, taking the time, using the support that you have around you, through your teachers, your family, your siblings, your friends, the upward bound tutors and staff, using your support system to say, hey, I don't want to give up on this goal yet. I just need help pivoting and redefining it, and then working from there. Okay. So we're going to practice again. So same thing. I'm going to pop off the screen and set a timer for 3 minutes. And I encourage you all to think about 3 goals for this academic year that you would like to set. They could be personal goals that you want to achieve, academic goals, professional goals, but just 3 goals that you want to accomplish within the next, 10 months that you are going to be in this grade currently. Okay. What you want to do as well is to remember to make them SMART. So what I'm going to do is I'll actually flip back to the slide that explains what SMART means. But one more time, just to explain what you're going to do. So for the next 3 minutes, you're going to reflect on and set some goals for this upcoming academic year. Okay, so I will see you all again in 3 minutes. All right, so we have a little less than a minute to finish thinking about those 3 SMART goals that you'd like to set for the upcoming academic year. Okay, so as this couple seconds starts to wrap up, let's see, got to turn my timer off there. Perfect. So as you start to wrap up your thoughts with your 3 SMART goals, I hope you had some time to really think through what those goals are going to look like for you and how you can start taking some action steps towards achieving them. So as we move on, we're actually going to start to think about motivation. Okay, so as an activity, I know we just did the 3 SMART goals, but just as I'm chatting here, I encourage you to write down 5 things that have successfully motivated you in the past. So these things might be a reward. So maybe it was good grades motivated you. Maybe it was money, right? Maybe it was knowing that you're going to have free time if you get something done now. Or the idea that you could, treat yourself to maybe your favorite food or some time with friends. So just take a moment to reflect on 5 things that have successfully motivated you in the past. And they can be specific, so they don't have to be in like 5 different categories like I just mentioned. Maybe it was 5 different types of food that you can remember really motivated you, or, the idea that you could, finish your homework so you could go to the football game that was during the weekend, or whatever it might be. So as we kind of move forward, I want you to keep this thought in mind. And you don't have to get too hung up on writing down 5 specific things, but just start to reflect on what things have successfully motivated you in the past. And the second part of this is, how are these things connected to your values that you just identified? So if you identified family as being a value, is family a motivation, right? Making your family proud, maybe, or being able to take care of your family, however that looks like for you. So really starting to think about what that motivation is and how it's connected with your core values. In the moments where you're having a hard time identifying how can I become motivated, or if you're just having that general, very common feeling of unmotivation, right? Like not feeling motivated, feeling unmotivated. How can you use your knowledge about your values to allow you to become motivated, right? So if you're having some trouble getting started, let's say it's the weekend, you have to get started on studying for something, or you have to write a paper, do an assignment, and you just have no motivation. How can you start to think about those values that you identified? Maybe your goals that you identified to help kind of inspire some motivation. Okay. All right. So when we're thinking about motivation, I really want to encourage you to check your self-talk. So what I mean by this is negative motivation sounds like something that is inducing fear, guilt, or anxiety, which is a very quick way to lead to procrastination. So something that might be, a negative motivator would be, if I don't get my homework done, then I can't go out with my friends. That's not really motivating, right? If I don't get my homework done, then I can't go out with my friends. If you end up still going out with your friends and you didn't get your work done, you're going to feel guilty because that was the self-talk you were sharing with yourself, right? You're creating anxiety and stress because now when you are doing your work, in the back of your mind, you're just going to be thinking, okay, if I don't get this done, then I can't go out and I'm going to disappoint my friends. I'm going to, this is going to be a terrible night because I can't go out now because I'm not going to get it done. So instead of thinking about the task at hand, you start to kind of go into this cycle of negativity. And that's not very motivating at all. It's actually just going to increase your stress and more likely not only impact your ability to get the thing done, but also impact your ability to focus and maybe lead to procrastination. So instead, a positive motivation or a positive motivator might be something like, when I get my homework done, I get to go hang out with friends, right? Same exact situation, just a slight shift in language. So if you tell yourself, okay, when I get this done, I get to go hang out. Or when I get this done, I get to go for a walk outside, or whatever that reward is that you're trying to work towards, okay? And this can be really helpful too when we're talking about not only tasks, so like those very short-term goals, but long-term goals too. So if you tell yourself, if I don't, let's use an example of my long-term goal for a very long time was to become a pastry chef. So if I don't become a pastry chef, then I'm going to be a failure, right? That would be negative talk. That would be something I would be trying to motivate myself of saying, okay, I don't want to be a failure, so I have to do the things to become a pastry chef. But that is very stress-inducing in itself. Instead, if I say, my end goal being a pastry chef, if I become a pastry chef, then I'll be living into my passion. That is a much more motivating goal. Ooh, living into my passion. That sounds interesting. That sounds like something that I want to work towards, instead of this idea of if I don't do something, then I'll become a failure. Okay. So really thinking about how you're talking to yourself and changing that perspective, starting to use that positive motivation, that positive self-talk to build that confidence, build your self-confidence, your ability to advocate for yourself, and to accomplish something that you're really proud of. That in itself will become more motivating. Okay. So a lot of times when I'm working with students or even just chatting with friends or colleagues and coworkers, somebody will say, I am motivated when I have the stress of a deadline to get work done, right? I think maybe we've all experienced this. I myself know that I need the stress of a deadline from time to time to get something done and to feel that motivation kick in. When I was a student, if I had an assignment assigned to me, it was very rare that I was going to start it the day it was assigned because I needed a little bit of that pressure from the deadline. What we want to be careful of is the potential impact is unnecessary levels of stress and anxiety around your due dates or exam times, right? That impacts your sleep. And then you end up having this experience of brain drain, what we call sometimes after cramming for a exam that you have, or like studying for a really long time, or maybe sitting down and working for like 3 hours on a paper because you put it off and now it's late, or maybe now you had to sacrifice some things you wanted to get done, right? So really starting to think about if you're using that motivation based on a timeline or motivation based on a deadline, it can be a positive motivator at times, but not always using it because it's not going to be the most sustainable for you. Because it can end up feeling like your stress levels are rising, or like every time that deadline is coming, you're using stress in a positive way, which is good, but it's still stress inducing. Okay. So instead, what you can do is schedule a meeting with a support resource a few days before your assignment is due. This is going to actually change the due date for you, right? So instead of, let's say we all have a paper due next Friday. So instead of saying, okay, Thursday night, I'm going to end up, staying up late just to finish my paper to get it done. Instead of that, maybe you say, okay, so Wednesday, I'm going to make myself an appointment with an upward bound tutor, or I'm going to make myself an appointment with my teacher and plan to meet with my teacher before class or during study hall or whatever it is. Because then I know that I have to have my draft done by Wednesday. So I have something to talk about with the tutor, or I have something to talk about with my teacher. And that way you're changing the deadline. You're not going to feel as stressed, but you're still using that positive structure that that you respond well to. Okay, so starting to think about what motivates me and what has motivated me in the past, and how can I just use it a little bit more strategically? Okay. The other thing to talk about is identifying if you typically need external accountability to motivate yourself. So if you know that you always need external accountability from a teacher reminding you, or a parent or a friend or a sibling or a family member, or Sophia herself motivating you, right? If you know that you always need to have somebody doing that for you, there's a potential that you might end up missing a deadline if that person or that external source forgets. So really starting to recognize, where is my best form of motivation coming from? Is it in myself? Can I inspire it within me? Or am I, really depending on that external source of motivation? And if you are one of those people who really needs that external accountability, starting to figure out how can you build into your daily routines or into your workflow routines, how can you build in that external accountability? So can you ask a classmate to be an accountability buddy? Can you say, hey, Sophia, you know what? I would really love if we kept each other accountable. So whenever we get math homework assigned, could we check in with each other the night before it's due to make sure that we both have it done? And if we don't, then we'll make that promise that we'll get it done, right? So it's having somebody else, having that external accountability buddy. If you don't have anybody coming to mind, or if that kind of feels too awkward, thinking about using a reminders app on your phone or on your computer, or having some type of visual external accountability that can help remind you about deadlines or due dates or just tasks that you have to get done. All right, and then one of the last things that we'll talk about today is how rest is part of the process. So rest is a really important thing to be seen as part of success and not a deterrent to success. A lot of times students that I work with who are high achieving students, or students who are, maybe they had a little bit of academic difficulty and they're just trying to get back to where they were hoping to be. They have this mindset that they have to work constantly. And there's a lot of research out there that tells us that when we take time to rest and to take a break, and by that, I mean mental rest. It doesn't have to be like physical rest of sitting in a chair and just doing nothing. But when we give our mind a break, we can actually reach higher levels of success. So something that we talk about a lot in college, but I think it's pretty applicable too in the K through 12 settings, is what does burnout feel like, right? When we have too much going on, whether that's academically or personally, and we don't give ourselves that time to rest. How is that going to impact our overall success? So I like to share, it's all about intentionality. Okay, work intentionally and then rest intentionally. So if you know that you have assignments coming up and you have a free study hall period and you go to study hall with friends and it's usually a really, really fun time. And so you don't really want to get work done, but you know that you have work that you got to get done. Think about using your time intentionally. Okay, so if you choose to use your time in study hall by socializing, you might have to then sacrifice socializing later to then be intentional about your work time, or flip it around. So if you know that you have plans that you want to get to after school with friends, use that study hall time intentionally. Say, okay, I have to get this work done at this time because I know that I then later can enjoy my time that much more when I'm just hanging out, resting, doing nothing. I'm not going to feel guilty or stressed that I didn't do my work yet. So it's really starting to think about rest being part of the practice. The other thing in this topic area is to think about giving yourself breaks. So if you are in a situation where you have to study for an exam and you have to study for a couple hours, or maybe you're writing a paper, it's going to take you, a few hours to get done. Really starting to give yourself non-distracting study breaks can be helpful. So what that might look like is after about 50 minutes of working, and the neurotypical person usually starts to lose focus after 50 minutes. So 50 minutes of working, maybe you set a timer. Once that timer of 50 minutes is up, you give yourself a 10-minute break. And during that break, making sure that you're choosing something to do that isn't going to be distracting. So like opening up TikTok and then scrolling, you're going to end up maybe much more than 10 minutes later, right? Of like actually lifting your head and being like, oh, wow, I should get back to work. So maybe not using your phone during that break time, but instead get up, walk around, stretch, get a snack, maybe make yourself a cup of tea, listen to a playlist. I usually tell students to make a study break playlist, curate your top favorite songs, 10 minutes, right? So 10 minutes worth of your top favorite songs that you never get sick of listening to. And whenever you have a study break or you just kind of need to like zone out and give your mind a break, go to that study break playlist, put it on, jam out, relax, dance, whatever it is. And then once the playlist is done, you get back into your work. Okay, making sure that you're achieving that balance so between work and rest is going to allow you to really hit higher levels of success and higher levels of motivation. Because when we're burnt out, we usually have no motivation. Okay. All right. So we covered a lot today. We covered how to set goals, what type of goals there are, what are our values, how do our goals tie into our values, how are we going to use our values to stay motivated, what type of motivation exists, and then finally realizing that rest is going to be a huge part of being able to stay motivated to reach our goals. Okay. At this time, if you have any questions, thoughts, or ideas, I welcome you just to pop them right into the chat box. And otherwise, I really thank you for your time and attention today. And, if I can ever be of further support, feel free to reach out to Sophia and we can get connected. Thank you so much for having me.